Assessing hive strength. Counting flying bees returning to the hive. Honeybee hives used for blueberry pollination in Atlantic Canada should meet a minimum hive strength standard as required and agreed upon in a contract between the blueberry grower and the beekeeper involved. Here is a quick review of the hive strength standards discussed in the first Pollination Education video, Bees and Blueberries in Atlantic Canada, the Hive Strength Standard. Specific methods of hive assessment are recommended for quantifying the strength of pollination units to determine whether the hive strength standard is being met. Short of counting all the honeybees in a colony, which is not practical, all other measures of hive strength are estimates. Only one method of hive strength assessment does not involve opening the hive. This method is to count the number of foraging bees at the hive entrance. A strong colony should show considerable activity at the hive entrance, with the majority of this activity being the foragers leaving and returning to the hive. As this method relies on foraging activities, it is only a realistic option above approximately 15 degrees Celsius when the bees are flying. Also, individual bees should only be counted once. So counting bees when they leave and again when they return would theoretically count each bee twice. Therefore, the recommendation of this method suggests only counting returning bees. This methodology is quite straightforward. The number of bees returning to the hive are counted for a set period of time. This number is then usually extrapolated through the use of a formula to estimate either the number of frames of bees or the overall number of individual bees in the colony. A Pacific Northwest Extension publication states that a colony with over 100 flying bees per minute would be a good colony. Although not specified, the suggestion would be that it meets a hive strength standard for pollination. No details are given on how this threshold has been determined. In good foraging conditions with air temperature in excess of 18 degrees Celsius and little wind, this count would reflect a colony with 4 to 6 frames of bees, or 9,600 to 14,400 individual bees. A recent research paper builds on this methodology. A more refined methodology was developed with the use of video recording of the hive entrance. This recording could then be slowed in replay for accurate counting. Although not practical for producers, this would give an accurate count of flying bees returning to the hive. These researchers estimated that for every 13 bees per minute returning to the colony, the hive contained 1 frame full of bees, or 2,400 individual bees, as the agreed upon number of individual bees per 1 frame of bees. For comparison with the method discussed previously, using 13 bees per minute as representing 1 frame of bees, then 100 returning bees would equate to approximately 7.8 frames of bees, or over 18,000 individual bees. Another methodology can be found in material published by the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. This method of counting returning bees is stated as a very crude ballpark estimate of colony strength. The number of bees returning to the colony is multiplied by a factor which represents the proportion of a full frame of bees, which consists of foragers. This work states that foraging workers make up a proportion of 0.06 or 6% of the bees on a full frame of bees during each counted minute. There is no support given for this supposition. So, in the example provided, 125 returning bees multiplied by 0.06 would indicate 7.5 frames of bees, or approximately 18,000 individual bees. This is described as a good, strong colony. It is worth noting that there is an approximate 25% discrepancy in the estimated number of bees between this methodology and the previously discussed methodology. During the 2021 pollination season, the Atlantic Tech Transfer Team for Apiculture undertook a trial to examine the usefulness of this method of hive strength assessment for our region. In total, 173 colonies providing pollination services on 10 wild blueberry fields in both New Brunswick and Nova Scotia were assessed. Each colony was observed for 15 seconds and all returning bees were counted. The number of returning bees during this time was multiplied by 4 to give a per minute equivalent. This allowed the number of bees per colony to be estimated based on the assumption that for every 13 bees counted, this represented 2,400 individual bees within the colony, or one full frame of bees. To assess the validity of this method, an alternative method for colony strength assessment based on an internal hive inspection involving counting the number of frames of bees was conducted on the same colonies. The air temperature was also recorded during colony assessments, as this impacts the activity of foraging workers. Prior to discussing our findings, let's look at some examples of this methodology in use. To better visualize this method of assessing hive strength, here is a demonstration of counting of bees returning to the hive over a 15-second interval. Feel free to count along and compare results. Ready? 3, 2, 1, count. Okay, that was counting in real-time speed. Now, the same video will play again, but slower this time, to make sure the count of flying bees returning to the hive is accurate before moving on to the next step. Ready? 3, 2, 1, count. When the video is slowed down, it is easier to see that there were a total of 34 flying bees that re-entered the hive over the 15-second period. Now that a count has been recorded, the next step is to multiply this number by 4 to obtain an estimate of the number of flying bees returning to the hive per minute. So 34 bees counted times 4 equals 136 bees returning per minute. Incorporating the estimate that for every 13 bees counted per minute translates to one full frame of 2,400 bees, this number is multiplied by 184.62, or 2,400 divided by 13, to produce an estimate of the overall number of bees that make up the colony. So 136 returning bees per minute times 184.62 equals approximately 25,108 bees total, making up the colony. As is the reality of many other aspects of beekeeping in Atlantic Canada, the validity of this hive assessment is largely dependent on the air temperature and weather conditions during the time of assessment. As an example, if a beekeeper or blueberry grower was to assess the strength of a particular pollination unit in June at 8 o'clock a.m. on an overcast morning when the temperature is still below 15 degrees Celsius, there will not be many bees out flying. However, upon internal assessments, it may be revealed that the colony, staying warm and dry within the hive, may easily exceed the agreed upon minimum hive strength standard and have many flying bees returning to the hive as the sun comes out and the temperature increases. To demonstrate this concept, ATTTA performed multiple counts of flying bees returning to the same hive recorded in a range of air temperatures. Here is the hive entrance at 9 degrees Celsius. At 9 degrees Celsius, there was one flying bee returning to the hive. Using the calculations from the first example, this would indicate there are approximately 0.31 full frames of bees in the hive, making up a total colony population of approximately 744 bees. Here is the same hive entrance at 16 degrees Celsius. Assessing the same hive at 16 degrees Celsius, there were 3 flying bees returning to the hive. Using the same calculations, this would indicate there are approximately 0.92 full frames of bees in the hive, making up a total colony population of approximately 2,208 bees. Here is the same hive entrance at 20 degrees Celsius. Assessing the same hive again at 20 degrees Celsius, there were 21 flying bees returning to the hive. Again, using the same calculations, this would indicate there are approximately 6.46 full frames of bees in the hive, making up a total colony population of approximately 15,504 bees. Finally, here is the same hive entrance at 27 degrees Celsius. Assessing the same hive once more at 27 degrees Celsius, there were 25 flying bees returning to the hive. Using the same calculations, this would indicate there are approximately 7.69 full frames of bees in the hive, making up a total colony population of approximately 18,456 bees. The inconsistency among these results shows the impact that air temperature and weather conditions can have on perceived hive strength, estimated using this visual hive strength assessment method. Of the 173 colonies assessed, only 7 exceeded the threshold of 100 returning bees counted in 1 minute. Using the more complex methodology, as demonstrated in the previous calculations, the counts of flying bees returning to the hive were used to estimate the number of bees in each colony as shown here. This is shown alongside the results using the frame count internal assessment method as shown here. The figure shows a difference in the mean estimate of the total number of bees between the two methods. This difference is still demonstrated when ambient temperature is taken into consideration and an air temperature threshold of above 20 degrees Celsius is used to divide the hives into two groups, as shown in this figure. The results from the 2021 trials suggest that in eastern Canada, during wild blueberry pollination, counting flying bees returning to the hive is not a reliable method of colony strength assessment. This method is recognized as weather dependent. As stated in the described methods, it is a technique that should be used at a minimum of 18 degrees Celsius, although the application of the threshold of 20 degrees Celsius for our results indicate that the results still show discrepancy in a comparison with a more direct methodology using internal frame count. The simple strength assessment that more than 100 returning bees per minute indicates a good colony would not have provided any meaningful results for the colonies we assessed. This is demonstrated by the fact that only approximately 4%, or 7 of 173 of the colonies we assessed, exceeded this threshold. This must be considered against the fact that the mean frame counts in our experimental hives met or exceeded accepted colony strength recommendations, as shown here. This method should be used with caution and only during optimal flying conditions. Even then, it would not provide a quantification of the hive's strength, but an indication of feasibility. In other words, whether the hive is good or not. The following table provides a review of the advantages and disadvantages of this method of assessing hive strength. Beginning with the advantages, this method is performed quite quickly, only requiring 15 seconds and one calculation to get a rough ballpark estimate of hive strength. Additionally, because this method does not require any physical interaction with the hive or bees, it does not require the assessor to have any beekeeping skills. The fact that this assessment is non-invasive to the colony is another advantage of this method. On the other hand, as shown in the results from the 2021 trial, this method of assessment can yield highly inaccurate estimates of hive strength. On top of this inaccuracy, the results of this method are largely dependent on weather conditions, including air temperature, wind speed, and precipitation, and it can only be used during ideal flying conditions and times. It can be concluded that counting bees returning to the hive is a poor method of colony strength for use in eastern Canada during blueberry pollination. At best, this method would have to be performed under optimal conditions, taking into consideration time of day, temperature, wind, and precipitation. When compared to internal inspections, for example frame counts, it would seem that counting flying bees returning to the hive is a less accurate method for assessing colony strength. Future videos of this ongoing pollination education series will investigate additional methodologies of assessing hive strength.